And they have to be translated and verified by the individuals, by institutions. How can we use blockchain to help us do that? Whereby you can track someone's history, someone's education track record, someone's employment history across government, across different institutions. In a case whereby someone brings a foreign certificate, it's very easy for the recruiter to say, this is not worth my time, because I have 50 other applications I have to go through when I can just make a call to the local institution. Is it possible? Can we tackle that? Can we ease that process? Then you go to the process of digital identity. Digital identity is verifying someone online. How do we make sure that the person that's trying to conduct a transaction is actually who they say they are? Here we have we have NIRA, which is the National Identification and Registration Authority, which is the primary source of all identification, primary source of identification information for most of our citizens. Most of the citizens have now national IDs. Now it's very difficult to access any service without a national ID. But how do we firm up that verification? Because one way is blockchain introduces a distributed network whereby you can verify someone from different entities, if you look at it that way. With having one primary source, it takes just one effort to compromise that source of identification, and the rest is just history. However, if we say we can identify someone using their national ID, using their record, they recently lost a phone, and they have a record at the police that someone reported a stolen, lost phone. We have that record. We use the police record to identify that person. We use the health records to identify that person. Then it becomes much harder to compromise a system that distributed it in that way. You may be aware, okay, with blockchain we say that it's a public ledger, but as it has already been mentioned, there are also private ledgers. So this can be such citizen identification, digital identities can be handled through private ledgers, whereby if any attempt to defraud or compromise the system, we immediately get a notification. If I have my ID, if I have a digital ID, I can choose who to give my ID. These days, you try to log onto the system, and they give you several ways in which you can log in. Do you want to log in via Facebook? Do you want to log in via Google, Gmail? Do you want to log in via... This is the same way it should be, that my digital identity, I choose to give you my ID so that you can do the work that you need to do, verify, and you don't keep that information. That is where we need to be going. So we talk about government procurements. Blockchain, smart contracts can be very influential when it comes to government procurement. Can we establish smart contracts? Things like payments. Things like bid security. This is something that can be sustained using blockchain. Performance guarantees, where someone says, okay, I guarantee to provide a service, and they give you almost like a collateral in case they don't meet that. This can be sustained through blockchain. If someone has a claims history, even the insurance company will not be able to give them that performance guarantee because they can see the history and say, you previously promised to deliver so much work, and on several occasions, your clients have made claims against you. So unfortunately, your history goes against you. It will cut down on all the misprocurements that are happening in government. Then talk about business and economy, revenue and tax collection. This is a sore subject for my colleagues in URA. I work very closely with the URA guys, and this is something we talk about all the time. If we can track transactions across, this would aid, this would, with absolute certainty, be able to predict the tax, the revenue, and the tax that are due to be collected. But we need this technology to work. Autonomous education tracking. I don't have to wait for at the end of term to know that my child has done poorly. I should be able to predict. I should be able to predict how they're going to perform at the end of the term. Government transactions in international businesses. The government should be able to transact globally within minutes. There's no need to make a phone call, then receive fax, then receive a copy, signed copy, countersigned copy. This is prolonging the entire process, wasting of the resources. If you can narrow down the time it takes to conduct some of these transactions, especially given that we have a proliferation of international bidders, it will help greatly in terms of saving the government. So we have financial resources, unfortunately running out of time, but we have government payments that can be helped with blockchain, the disbursement of donor funds. We already have partners that want to collaborate on us on blockchain technologies that would allow them to disburse funds down through the different chains. Because with blockchain, they'll be able to know, oh, these funds have actually gone to the person that were intended for. We have Know Your Customer. Again, Know Your Customer, eKYC will be made simple with blockchain. The legal and regulatory, smart laws, formation and execution. Smart law, as a smart law would have all the data pertaining to the law. You have all the actions related to achieving those results. You have the conditions prescribed by the law. For example, tax collection. If at the end of the year, I don't have to wait for me to reconcile all my transactions, if all the transactions have been tracked online, I can just, the law will automatically execute, give me a bill which can be also automated. So in summary, with blockchain, the government is bound to save several resources through the adaptation of blockchain. Simplified and streamlined e-government services, government transaction based on trust to guarantee security. But in all these, citizens' engagement is key. It is the citizens that need to be demanding for these services, always pushing us forward. Because without the demand from the citizens, it becomes very difficult. But also, we need to have a balanced view. We have challenges, yes, but let us be positive. Yes, we can highlight all the negative sides, but also let's counter those with the positive sides. Let us play with both feet, like someone would say. Good players, unfortunately it's a football analogy, but the best players in the world always play with both feet, the left and right. So let's have a balanced argument, positive and the negative. And that way we'll be able to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmy. In the interest of time, I'd like to request our second speaker to please come to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you Mr. Hamada Zahawi.
Thank you very much for having me. I want to give a special thank you to my former classmate and colleague, Kwame Rugunda, who invited me to come today. Traveled from Los Angeles. I'm very happy to be here in Uganda to be with you guys today, speaking about a very important topic. My colleague from NIDA, I think, did a phenomenal job covering a lot of the aspects of government engagement and so forth. Okay. Also, that music was not allowed to be on there. And so I want to talk about this very, very important topic of how blockchain can revolutionize the citizen and government exchange and nexus. And I want to do that through a story. And that story really starts in February of 2017. Let's see if I get this right. Oop, perfect. Oh, nope. Perfect, there we go. Okay, and so the story starts with the World Government Summit. There we go. World Government Summit, and it was a student challenge. I think Kwame was with me there. And the question they asked us is, what will the future of government look like? Well, I think most of us can say, if we were to anticipate the way things are going now, government would be fairly disconnected from the citizen. And so that was the main issue that every single of the 12 teams from the top universities in the world suggested. And I think their suggestion to all of us was, well, let's try to have a citizen-centric government where the citizens play a very important role in the process. But we took it a little bit further. We said, well, what about citizen engagement that comes from a citizen government coin or a CitGov coin? But instead of me trying to explain it to you, let me actually play a video from that exact pitch that we did to a panel of judges in front of an audience there. So if I can pull up the video, hopefully it works. Gustavo. The idea is Gustavo is uneducated and also unskilled, but he has a desire to give back to the community. And so he comes up with a concept of providing recycling for his community. And so, what does Gustavo do? Well, Gustavo goes to the Ministry of Environment and tells them, I have this idea. I want to give back to my community, and I want to be remunerated for doing so. And so he collects, and the impact that he's had, the Minister of Environment provides him with a CitGov coin. Well, this you're going to be able to do a lot with. You can use it to cash in. You can use it for education, for food, for health, for utilities, all kinds of credits. But here's the best part. That coin does not just give you allowance to have remuneration, but it gives you a physical piece of the government. Now, you hold us accountable. The government is held accountable for the actions. There is a symbiotic reciprocity between both parties. That is what makes this thing a unique experience. So there you have it. We pitched the idea. It was as a student challenge, and I'll let you know what happened. But from there, I really got engaged in the concept of how citizen and government can come together. And so I published an article titled, Can Blockchain Revolutionize Citizen Engagement? And so this talk really is predicated on that article. I mean, we've talked and beaten it up, what is blockchain, how it works, but basically a decentralized peer-to-peer technology that connects users around the world. And there's basically three core features that I've seen that make sense. The accessibility, how it's available and ensures parity for all. The equitability, the immutable order and the sequence to ensure fairness, so it's not somebody's out of sequence and the first is actually awarded and accredited accordingly. And the incorruptibility, the transparent verification process that exists to avoid the fraud. And so how can these three core elements impact the connection, the interconnection between government and citizen? Well, those core impacts, those core qualities of what blockchain is, can increase engagement through politics, digital democracy, increases citizen participation through community advocacy, and forges trust in the government by disrupting corruption. Okay? Participation, engagement, and disrupting corruption. So let's take each one and unpack them. Digital democracy. Well, my colleague and friend now from Agora, which you'll hear about a little bit later, Leonardo, created a technology of Agora. And Agora, excuse me, really is a mechanism of like a game changer. Let me ask you this question to the audience. Let's make it a little bit more interactive. How many of you guys voted in your country's elections in the last elections? Let's see a show of hands. Okay, that's not meant to happen. You guys are not meant to be so unapathetic. Okay. Okay, well, I was going to tell you that if, for those who didn't vote, let's just put it that way, I saw too many hands go up, but let's say for those who didn't vote, if I could tell you could vote off your smartphone, would you have voted? Right? That to me is incredible. In America, we have an incredible administration right now. I'm not going to get into details about it. But suffice to say, about 50% of America voted, which means 25% of that 50% actually voted for the current administration. That's pathetic. That's apathy. If they were able to vote from their homes without intimidation and so forth, I think it would have been a game changer. And that is what Agora is trying to achieve. And they were able to do it through a ledger in Sierra Leone where all the votes were tallied and displayed for the public. And now they've been able to do it in Switzerland with students. So it is a proof of concept that is working. Participatory democracy. There's an app in Australia that allows people to vote for those issues that really afflict them in their local communities. Put those issues front and center, allows people to vote on it. And that, again, brings a lot of discussion to the table. And liquid democracy, sounds bizarre, right? I've just recently discovered this. But what it does, it uses proxy voting. And proxy voting basically means, like, I don't have the time to do it. And I don't have any interest in voting on this issue. Well, you pass that vote to somebody who does. And that person will vote on your behalf. And that is going to be registered in a blockchain so that you actually preserve the trust involved. But what have we done here? Through digital democracy, you've created a nexus between the government and the people. So people now are involved. They think they can change the dynamic of what can transpire there. That is an important backbone to the whole concept of what we're talking about. Next one is community service. Currency of community action. Sounds fascinating, and it is. In fact, Social Coin, a Spanish company, has created the ability to do exactly what we pitched over there in Dubai back in 2017, where for every action that you commit for the community, you are rewarded with a coin, and that coin can be remunerated in different places. Social advocacy. This one I really like, because I'm a lawyer, so I'm not sure if this concept exists in Uganda. But the concept is, in America, if you are indicted for a crime, before you actually go to trial, you can be put in prison unless you can post bail. A lot of people can't afford bail because a lot of the people who are deemed criminals or alleged criminals are not going to have the monetary ability to basically post bail. So what they did is, using Monero, they created the concept of saying, use the spare power of your PC to data mine. And with that data mining, you can make maybe about $3, maybe up to $5 a month. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you aggregate it all together, it could be a lot of money. And that money would essentially be used for posting bail for people in the Bronx. Fascinating concept. And then philanthropic impact, Big Give Foundation, takes and follows where your dollar is going to make sure that you know what's happening. So you have transparency, right? And that is a very, very fundamental process and product of donations, because I think donor fatigue comes from the fact that you don't know what is actually hitting the ground. So it helps with donor fatigue, it speeds up disaster relief responses, and it minimizes terrorist financing. And then disrupting corruption. I think this is an important area that we sometimes tend to ignore, but I think it's very important. My colleague from NIDA spoke about public procurement, so I won't go into it. And smart contracting, how you can monitor, track, and audit different public contracts. Government services and land registry. We're going to have a panel afterwards where I'll speak a little bit about what Dubai is doing in terms of a smart city and in terms of their strategy to be able to put a lot of their resources online. In fact, what they say is by actually going through blockchain, where 50% of their transactions are going to be put on blockchain by 2021, they're anticipating saving about $1.3 billion every year in just shuffling of documents. Doesn't that drive you bananas when you're sitting there and they're stamping documents? You're still boarding planes where they're still giving you pieces of paper? This is going to save it through the blockchain concepts. And finally, digital ID, again, we've beaten this one up, but Civic is doing a phenomenal job of providing people with digital identification and digital identification cards to allow people to do things like, you know, tackling money laundering, KYC, and financial inclusion. I can't tell you how many times I've walked in, forgotten my wallet or my credit card, and been like, wow, I wish I just had something where I could do a fingerprint or an eye scan so I can purchase an item just based on credit I have. And I think they were doing some things like that in Sweden. So those are the core key concepts of how government and citizen can come together. You disrupt the corruption, you create trust, you engage people from the bottom up and the top down, and you're able to make across people in terms of community action. I think those are three core principles. But with every good thing comes a challenge. Boom. and that is there's security breaches. We haven't talked a lot about this, or maybe I haven't listened to it, but last year alone there was a heist for $550 million. I think we did talk obviously about regulation and so forth, but that obviously creates a lot of queasiness and reticence among people to engage in blockchain. The lack of consensus building. We all talk about decentralization. Well, there's people that still believe in centralization of information, and that public ledger is owned by one person as opposed to a group of people and decentralized. The volatility. I know Lou spoke about volatility in fiat currencies, but you obviously have it, and the uncertainty, the unpredictability within Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I remember when I wrote that article in December, everybody's going bananas. Wow, you know, Bitcoin was $19,500. Now it's around $8,000. And finally, the limited public sector scalability. There's inconsistent legislation, dare I say schizophrenic legislation that exists not just among nations, but among states, among cities. And there's just an inconsistency that exists. And I'm glad that we had a panel on the regulations and the legislation and so forth. But all that said, Bitcoin really is here to stay. In the next 6 months, there's going to be 100 conferences on blockchain in 30 different countries covering issues from law to healthcare. That's nuts. 2,000 blockchain startups, 1,000 blockchain angel investors, and up to $6 billion up for grabs by 2020 in terms of revenue that will be generated from blockchain technology companies. 70 countries are drafting legislation, speaking about and discussing the cryptocurrency space as we speak. And there's so many sectors that are involved in the cryptocurrency space. That basically means it's not just in one lane, but it's been spread everywhere. And we spoke about this yesterday. Fintech, healthcare, law, real estate, transportation, all kinds of public services. So from my opinion, it's here to stay. And given that's here to stay, and as my colleague Alexa said, talk to the next generation where blockchain is going to be very much involved in their lives, I think the connection and the nexus that is needed between you citizens and the government really is going to be able to benefit from blockchain. And I think that's what we really need to be focusing on. So with that, thank you very much, and glad to be here.
Thank you. I don't know if any of you recognized something during his presentation, especially on the video. And I'm just going to ask you to look at it. I'll speak to the DJ, the guy at the sound machine, and I'll show you some similarity that just caught my eye. Very interesting, but Hamada, I think you'll love this during the panel session. So allow me, please, and before I actually ask the panelists to come on, introduced by the moderator, I just want to let you know we have some time issues that we're working on right now, but please bear with us. We have an action-packed afternoon and a very, very, very encouraging, engaging, and thought-provoking closing ceremony. Remember, for those of you who would like to follow this online, our Twitter handle is at blockchain, Africa Blockchain UG. And for those of you who would love to follow live stream, it's on cryptosavannah.com. cryptosavannah.com. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce our moderator for the next session. She's the Vice Chairperson, Prime Minister's Delivery Unit. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dorothy Kisaka. Round of applause. Our Twitter handle, at blockchainug, and live stream is on cryptosavannah.com. Dorothy, thank you.
Thank you very much, Julius, and what a fantastic session we've just had. Please give another round of applause. Our panel that's coming up is going to be handling a very exciting topic: how technology can transform delivery of government services. I work in the Office of the Prime Minister, and there is established a new unit called the Delivery Unit, and we are focusing on service delivery and quickening the process of how people in education and health sectors are receiving services from government. If you looked at the newspaper today, you may have seen the conversation around biometrics and the fact that they're going to be checking people, ensuring that absenteeism is reduced to 0. That's the goal, and we hope we can achieve it. So the goal is to have a culture of speed and rigor within the public service. And we are very excited about the panel that's going to discuss this kind of thing today. Let me introduce our panelists. The first one to come up is Dorothy Okello. Dorothy Okello is the chairperson of Uganda Communications Commission, and she serves in several capacities, and she'll be introducing herself a little bit more when we start the session. Please give her another round of applause. Welcome, Dorothy. Our second panelist is Stephen Kaboyo. Please welcome Stephen from Alpha Capital. Stephen will be saying a little bit more about himself also in his own voice so that you get to know who he is properly. And then we have, is it Sam? Amy Mukasa. He's just been up here. Where are you, Amy? Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you for a great presentation, Amy, from NITA. Please give him another round of applause. And finally, Hamada Zenawi, you're welcome to join us. From the Democratic Governance Fellow, Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Michael Chiberu from Blockchain and Cybersecurity, a blockchain and cybersecurity expert. Michael, you are very welcome to join us. Okay. The microphone too. Is it coming on? Is it on? Okay. You're very welcome. And what we are going to do in this session is you're just going to take 1 minute and just pitch who you are and what are your general thoughts on the topic that we're discussing. Then we shall go into the banter back and forth. And I want to start with Zenawi, since you're already familiar with the mic. Can you just say what you do back home and what your general thoughts are about the topic? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, as my colleague said, my name is Hamada Zahawi. I'm an attorney based in California, in Santa Monica, California. And I was with Kwame at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard last year, where we did a lot of research in this area. So I'm very happy to be involved in talking about the transfer of technology and how technology can actually help with government services and delivery. And I think one of the main areas I do want to kind of have an opportunity to speak about, and I think I spoke to you, the moderator, about this, is asking us the question, is it important or is it best to have government deliver services at the national level, at the federal level, at the state level, at the city level? And I think that is going to make a massive difference in terms of how government services are delivered and the sandbox that's required to pilot some of these programs. And I'll speak about it in terms of just the country example of Dubai that I've seen firsthand and how they're able to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As you know, in Uganda we have, we've decentralized, and now we have 120 districts. 100 and going on to 130 maybe. Oh. And so that's a very, very valid. Michael, can you just give your introduction?
Yes, thank you. I'm Michael Chiberunagenda. I'm a cyber security expert, blockchain, and also the vice chair of Blockchain Association of Uganda. Generally from the topics, wonderful. I mean, it's great to hear not only actually what's happening locally, but especially what's happening abroad. Myself, I do consulting a lot in Switzerland. I live actually in Switzerland in Zug. And also in Germany, I work with different corporations. So I have the chance to actually see the challenges going on, also in the blockchain space. And I believe that we have here great speakers and panelists, especially also here, we're able to connect the two worlds to see that we strive in Uganda and also send out a great message. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Most of us are nervous about the insecurities of this new technology, so having you here is a great assurance. Dorothy? Still good morning. Okay, try.
Thank you, first of all, to the organizers for having me as part of this panel. Dorothy Okello, as introduced, I chair the Uganda Communications Commission, but as I like to say, my day job is as a senior lecturer in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Makerere University. And so when I wear those two hats, the topic for our panel is very interesting from the perspective of how the blockchain can support delivery of government services. And I look at it very broadly from two perspectives. One, as the blockchain being a platform, which itself rides over the communication infrastructure. Which is what UCC would be looking at. But then I also look at it at what is our capacity and what are our resources available at a human resources level to manage this space. So those will be the issues of interest for me.
Thank you. And I think we want to talk to you also about education, and because you are involved in that to some great extent.
That's true.
Okay. Stephen?
Thank you, Dorothy. It's a pleasure to be here and participate in this exciting dialogue. I think for me, the train has left the station. We need to play catch up. My name is Stephen Kaboyo. My 9-to-5 job, I run a financial services firm called Alpha Capital. Our focus is on sovereign asset management. We do a bit of institutional FX trading. What is relevant to me at this event is our markets advisory product that we have. And for the last 1 year, we've been overwhelmed by the kind of inquiries we've got to advise people on investing in cryptocurrencies as an asset class. So I'll be sharing a bit of that today. We also have published our views on cryptos in the Uganda's context, which appears in the domestic press, international press. That has also had very quite interesting responses. I also sit on a couple of corporate boards in Uganda. I also chair a presidential advisory group on economic matters and investment. My previous life was at the central bank as head of markets, where I spent 20 years before my hair started thinning a bit. But I have that regulation aspect and also the market practice. The blend is very interesting, especially in the context that we're going to be discussing a blockchain.
Thank you, Stephen, and very welcome. I'll come back to you in a minute to talk about the readiness of our country to embrace this technology. But let's first have Amy just say a little bit more about himself.
Thank you. My name is, as I said, my name is Emi Mukasa, representing Director of E-Government Services from the National Information Technology Authority of Uganda. I think blockchain as a topic is interesting, both from the government's perspective, but also from the citizen perspective. And we need to find a way in which the public is educated, and also we need to find a way in which the public has access to this information. so that they can make good judgments. We've talked about blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and it's very important that we distinguish between the two. And it's my hope that by the end of the day, by the end of this conference, everyone can fully articulate the difference between blockchain and cryptocurrencies, because this is what is going to drive the conversation forward. If we can distinguish the two, then we can have a good conversation, both in terms of the pros and cons of utilizing the technology.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. It was very interesting to listen to the president yesterday. Really speaks so positively about this new technology. So in terms of the mental infrastructure, if you're talking at the political level, our president is ready, and we hope our leadership can be ready at a policy level. But Zenawi, in terms of the framework, in terms of the structures, in terms of governance, how can Uganda embrace this new technology? You talked about what is happening in Dubai and in other economies. I just want you to talk from a governance point of view, how we can embrace this technology.
Thank you very much. I think at least from the purely Ugandan perspective, it would be imprudent for me to speak on behalf of my colleague at NIDA, because I think he really dissected what the government is doing from a applicability perspective. But suffice it to say, I think what I would want to contend is to say, trying to do it on a national scale, I think, is very difficult. As you said, the country is now has 120 units, as you described them, with potentially 130. That is good because it allows focus on specific communities, but also it requires a lot of bookkeeping and to keep track of what everybody is looking for and needs. Using an example of Dubai, I do want to pitch it because I think they've been able to do something that a lot of other countries have not. First of all, they have a lot of money. So they've been able to throw a lot of money at the solution, which a lot of money itself is not going to help, but they were able to get the best experts in blockchain. I think they've been talking about blockchain for, I don't know, at least 5 years. I mean, they're way ahead of the game in that perspective. And I think the reason they are also is because the country is very regulated and very well governed from that perspective. So it allows them to kind of use the city as a petri dish to really try different solutions and mechanisms. And given the fact that, again, because affluence is high there, means the internet penetration is beyond imagination, there's excellent roads and excellent infrastructure, allows a lot of these things to come to fray. So I wouldn't really, so what I want to mention is that fact. I think also, trying to do it on a national level comes back to a very fundamental point that was mentioned yesterday, I believe, by the main keynote speaker about agility. And agility in and of itself as a nation is difficult. And you can't really fault them for that. But if an agility as a city is something to be said, and that's why they term these concept as a smart city, because there is something there that could be able to be professed and go forward. So I think from Uganda's perspective, looking at how Kampala, which has been the capital for a very long time and been the center of commerce and so forth, should be used in either Kampala as a whole city, which is already very populated, or portions of Kampala, and how these services can come into being, and then using that to kind of project outwards of how it could be expanded on a national level.
That can actually happen, blocking 2 million people in Kampala as a city and have the technology work only there. That's new learning for me.
Or rolling it out in phases, I think I mean, again, I think NIDA would speak very well, my colleague from NIDA, about how they're able to kind of put these things into motion and then roll it out slowly but surely. So that, again, like you say, you don't want people in the countryside or northern Uganda or eastern Uganda to feel that they're not getting the same benefits that the people in Kampala are getting. But I think it is something that you can roll out gradually and probably a fairly quick time frame.
Okay. So you have a small group, like a pilot project, Kampala?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, talk to us about what you perceive as the readiness of government to embrace this technology in service delivery.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. I think, like I said, the train has left the station. I think from a public point of view and private sector point of view, we need to put our ducks in a row. What do I mean by that? I think when you look at government's ability to embrace emerging technologies, it comes down to 3 elements. One is the people, 2, the processes, and 3, the technology itself. So this new platform really is exciting because it brings on board a total reshape of our systems, again, both in the private sector and the public sector. However, let me give an example. The government needs to be understood as a huge bureaucratic machinery. I would compare it to a 24-wheeler truck. Making a bend or a corner is not easy. It's very complicated. So as we discuss this, we need to look at that perspective and build our expectations around that. However, there are so many things that we need to look at when you try to analyze the 3 elements. When you start with the processes, before we get into people, analyze the government current technology environment. It is characterized by very low usage. It's fragmented. The duplicative systems, the long procurement lead times, systems are not integrated. I told you that I was in a government entity a number of years ago. A memo coming from level 7 to level 6 takes 2 days. There are about 10 people that are involved in that memo. The drafter, the person who types it, goes back to the boss check, gets to the envelope, messenger takes it upstairs, it has to be received, stamped. The secretary opens it. By the time it gets to the boss, the final recipient, it's 2 days. So as we talk about inefficiencies in government, I think those, and Dorothy, the moderator, comes from that space.
Things have changed. Things have changed.
I think it really lays out the case that we need to embrace a blockchain. It may not be the entire solution, but at least it will take us a step further.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So the issue of inefficiency is very paramount, definitely. And if blockchain is going to help us, that will be awesome. Somebody had said that government is like a huge airplane, and it never stops. But you fix the mistakes as it is in orbit. You just keep fixing. So this is one of our ways of fixing. Let's come to you, Dorothy. Uganda Communications Commission. What are you doing for us in terms of having government get ready for this amazing technology?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. As a commission, we're responsible for 2 areas, which really they're the same because of convergence, the communication infrastructure and broadcasting. Mm-hmm. And that also brings in social media and all these other things. So from the infrastructure point, really looking at what are our networks like and how widespread and easily accessible are they? Because you need to, the blockchain platform needs to ride over that infrastructure, and we need to make that available. I take comfort from what Zawadi says, that we can roll out, which means that it can follow where we have the best access and all that, but that still needs to be managed. The other thing is around the regulation, and it was a very engaging panel that we had before, looking at issues around regulation, because we need to understand what are the type of services that blockchain will support and how they align with our existing mandate. So if I take an example that we in Uganda are very conversant with social media, blogging, and what it is you can do or not do in this space that falls within the purview of UCC. with the blockchain, when I reflect on it, and please, this is not the official UCC position because we didn't have a discussion on this. Well, we can know who, is it a TVO we are trying to find? I think the Ugandans will appreciate, but we can know who you are very, very easily. I think taking another example from what's happening in Uganda around SIM card registration, we've had SIM card registration, all of us are supposed to be registered, all our SIM cards that we're using are supposed to be registered, but we're still having serious crime cases that remain unsolved because we don't know actually who these people are, even though they have the cards are supposedly registered or things like that. So I think with the blockchain technology, there is a lot that gets simplified in terms of the day-to-day business that UCC needs to undertake to make communication or the communication sector a very safe space to be. I think also as UCC, we've been very active in promoting innovation. And so this is a very good space for us also to be from that perspective in terms of the opportunities we provide for people to innovate in this space and come up with more solutions that ride on top of the blockchain platform. So we are, I think, as was said in the regulatory panel, the two things we are doing, we are learning how to manage the space and let people have their freedoms, but responsibly. But at the same time, we need to allow people to exercise in this space. And one thing I will certainly take away from this event is the sandbox idea, so that people can have space to do things, but while we're also learning how we protect people around us.
Okay, thank you very much, Dorothy. One of the things that happens in service delivery, in my experience, is there are so many inequalities. There are citizens who feel like they are the end users of government service, and I'm coming to you, Amy. They're the end users of government service, but it never gets to them. So we need to strengthen this social contract between government and the people. And I'm wondering if you can just comment on that. How do we strengthen this social contract, this romance around goods and services, and yet some end users are not receiving, part of the national cake, their inequalities. Can you just comment on that?
Thank you, Dorothy. And I think from government is very key to examine all these cases. But first of all, we need to be aware of where we are now. Look at what are the causes? What are the causes? How do we tackle some of these issues? How do we increase citizen engagement? Because through the engagement with the citizens, it's where the solutions are going to come from. That is the only way you're going to find out, first of all, what the issues are. And it's the only way you're going to be able to model solutions based on those issues. So as government, there's a service, there's a GCIC service that allows citizens to communicate to government, just to broadcast, to post, to ask any question to government. And these questions tend to be answered either through social media. And it's key for all government entities to be present on social media. It is one of the things that we have been pushing, that at least every organization needs to have social media presence. They need to be able to respond to queries online, need to have a Twitter handle. Information travels so quickly when it is put onto social media. So as government tries to move forward and looks ways of enhancing services, simplifying services, we need to be able to get as much feedback as possible from the citizens. And one of the ways we can do that is engaging them on social media. And not only just engaging them, but actually getting that information, analyzing it and contextualizing it, so that we understand what the message is, the message that is coming from from the citizens.
Thank you, Amy. I think that's a very key, it's a very crucial part in the whole service delivery chain, engagement of citizens, and I think Zanawi, who talked a lot about that in the new methodologies of service delivery, stakeholder conversations are very key to what we are doing. And again, Amy, you also bring up the issue of data. Once it's collected, what do we do with it? And I want Michael at the end there to talk about it. We collect so much data, like in health, like in education, we have so much data. The biometric machines that we're introducing now, we're collecting so much data. How do we use it? And how can you just comment on how the whole big data thing and the blockchain technology as a person in security?
Thank you for asking. It's indeed a challenge, and I'm working a lot in big data areas actually for banks and multinational companies in Europe. And one of the areas always the security of the data. There's a new, let me say, currency, and it's not called Ugandan shilling, but it's called data. People trade data. If you go on Facebook, the data you put, it's valuable. It is basically money. So we have to look at security on the one side, very important. Cybersecurity works with regulators, etc. We have to look at, when we look, let me jump a bit to blockchain. Blockchain is a database, it's open, depends how it's built. There are different chains. When we talk about the public ledger, the information basically it's available, is seen. But it's not that you see the person, you see just a hashtag more or less. Now, but before, for example, we take on now the land registry and say, oh, we would like to look into this and put on the blockchain, we first need to gather the data. It has to have a specific quality. On the one side, we need to structurize it and bring it into the right format to then put it on the blockchain. Now, the blockchain, we can't change the data once you have put it there. We can't go back and say, oh no, that was a mistake. Actually, it's not that. It's not this owner. It is that owner. It is written once. You can't change it. You can only add new records. So that means the data quality is another thing. Not just that we gather data. The other area is actually how good is the data. And then there you go also with security, because I'm taking on data. I want to make sure the data goes through a secure channel. So you spoke earlier about the SIM card registration, etc., which is connected to data of a person. And somehow there's a crime and the data doesn't connect. That means there was a breach. So when we talk about data, the one thing, big data, we're living in the center of it. Today we actually talk about minimalized data, that we only capture the data which is really required, not more. And then with that data, again, we work in the areas where it's required and also give out what is needed in that specific department or that specific area.
I think that's one of the most exciting things about blockchain, the fact that once data is uploaded, it can't be changed.
Correct.
You know, because we have fake news, we have people playing around with even pictures, you know, and you're constantly asking, is this fake? Is this correct? Is this the real thing? So I think in terms of establishing faith on what is available online, that is very, very key. I just wanted us to engage a little bit in detail on automated education tracking. I thought that was a fascinating idea for Uganda. Education service, education, UPE, and all the conversation around how our children are learning, the curriculum available, how are they progressing. And I don't know, any of you can go in on this, the automated education tracking as a facility that we can have from blockchain. Do you want to start, Amy?
Yeah, so I think we know education is key. I think we've always been preached to that without education, we won't get into, we're not going to go far. That is true to a certain degree, of course, we won't go into the details, but we need to be able to educate the younger generation. But also we need to find ways of holistically educating them. So in so doing, we have to be able to monitor and track their progress, not just at the end of the term doing exams, but we need to be able to actively monitor their progress throughout, such that by the end of the term, you know that this student is within 95% certainty is going to get first division. And how do we use that using blockchain? How can we bring in a solution that automatically tracks their progress across the entire year, across the different terms? Now, these are the conversations we need to be having with some of the private sectors, because we are already seeing so many automated solutions, automated education solutions. So how can we ease that, take it a little bit further, draw from the concepts, from the blockchain concepts, and include that in some of the systems that we have now? Do we get rid of exams? Do we actively monitor, give a percentage every week? Because otherwise, if you to ask the school to monitor student performance on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, it becomes quite cumbersome. But how about if we create a system that intrinsically tracks that progress? It could be maybe the education, the methodology that's being used. It could be through the curriculum. But in all this conversation, we need to have some way of automating this to take the burden away from the teachers, so that the teachers can concentrate on teaching.
I really like the concept very much, because right now numeracy and literacy levels in our country are quite low. One of the things we are tracking in education is absenteeism. And if the teacher is not in class, therefore the children are not learning. And then we have this generalized curriculum where everybody learns the same thing at the same time, irrespective of how they learn. So maybe there is room for innovation around this. I don't know what some of you other panelists think. You want to make a comment on this?
I can make a comment on that. I think that one is, and we keep talking about it, that our education doesn't train us for the field and all, but I think that what is the context in which we are having our education delivered? What are the constraints that we have to engage with? And what is the best way within the different constraints that we have to have a holistic education delivered? I think, to me, the questions would also be around what is it then that we want to measure in terms of how we are taking our education forward. And of course, and the other issue of easing, so that we're not putting too much of a burden on the teachers. Because if we can broaden the spectrum of what it is that we are measuring, and automation can allow us to more easily track multiple, for lack of a better way to put it, multiple variables. So that if you are a student who's really gifted with their hands, okay, you are not being graded in the same way. There are certain basics. There's numeracy and literacy. Those are certain basics. But you're not being graded in the same way as what we would call the bookworm. I mean, you love your books. That's your space. And as you go through the system, the opportunities available to you are also diverse, depending on actually who you are as a person. And I think that will greatly help us. From the engineering side, I can share that a lot of people who end up maybe with a diploma, ordinary diploma or higher diploma, they're really looking towards getting a degree at the end of the day. That's true. When you're a technician or a technologist, you look like you're not yet there, okay? And yet, really, to develop, we need a ratio between engineers and technicians, and I think the standard is around 1 to 20. So how are we monitoring our education process as we go up and identifying the different talents and spaces for each of us so that as you come up, you feel valued in the space that you are in. I think automation can allow us to do that. I think the blockchain technology, and I haven't gone too much into this area, but I think that it can also help us get to know who you are as a person and get you to be valued in that space, and that I think is an area that would be interesting. I know yesterday someone spoke about the use of blockchain in behavioral expectations. So these are all spaces that we can actually be able to get in, especially aided by technology.
Yeah. Stephen, you look like
Dorothy, just allow me to sort of deviate a little bit, but still in the same space of education. Because I think education cuts across from the young people to the higher level of where most of the people here sit. Now, in order to be able to gain the critical mass we need, I agree, education is key. However, we need to realize that we'll expect a bit of pushback because we are not on the same page in terms of knowledge with respect to blockchain. So for policy makers, I think it's key that they are brought on board as quickly as possible, have the right skills at that level in order to facilitate the embracement that we need for this to go forward. So for me, I think it's key that once the right people understand the promise, it will be much easier to move to the second level.
Thank you, Stephen. Michael, you look like you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. I just like what Mr. Stephen just said, and I just want to add on that very channel. As a Skipia group here in Uganda, we have done much work in the space of blockchain, trying to educate partly government and also private sector. And one of the things we looked at, we've been running cybersecurity conference here in Uganda for the last 5 years, and we added blockchain last year to it. And one of the things we also did is to engage the universities, engage the youth, making sure that we don't talk about the future, but we're living our future here, sitting, learning in old style books and things. And then when they reach after 5 years hard study and the parents working hard to send them to school, they don't find jobs because you've been teaching them about something behind. But what is lying before them, you don't teach. So we've been working with East African University, to give a name, for example, to actually, when we receive visitors like this time also from Switzerland, we meet, we educate the staff, that they learn at, first of all, what is it all about? Blockchain, is it a new elephant that they found in the national park? Is it, what is it about? And then we remove the elephant and go down to the chain. And after they understand, we talk to the VC and they're like, oh, okay, so you mean these long chains always the students do to register, we could do that on the blockchain? Or you mean these parents in Nigeria that are always saying, yeah, we're gonna pay the tuition and they're not paying, now they can pay once with the Bitcoin and they can't reverse it. So payment, we can ease in the process. So when we talk about the future, and we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, which is partly of blockchain, artificial intelligence, etc., we need to go down to the people who actually can benefit from it, but especially will be our next ministers, will be our next people giving actually jobs out, etc., so that we don't create a gap unnecessary there. So the education part, very interesting. I like what Emmy said. I never thought about that. I really like that. And we are looking at ways, for example, also how do the students, for example, can benefit with this technology that someone from abroad sends their tuition, for example, to unblock those tensions which usually come in that area. So we need to start there at the base. We're going to be meeting the farmers associations to show them how they can take their produce, tokenize it, and it's visible in Europe in the big store. and someone purchases it there from Europe without the middleman, and they will have never known that we're growing coffee, we're growing tea, etc., through blockchain technology.
Thank you. As we do our final closing remarks, I'm just fascinated by the phraseology you used, Zenawi's citizen-centric government. It looks to me like with blockchain, we have a new opportunity of engaging citizens more in the services that government is delivering. My only thought is when this frightened governments, when this frighten the people who are in charge, when everybody can know all the time what's happening, where it's happening. And in your closing remarks, we'll start with you, Zenawi, and can you just make a comment on that, and everybody else will make a comment on anything around this whole idea of delivering services with blockchain.
Thank you. Again, I think Amy said it best. It's going to be difficult to be able to deliver services without the input of the people, because at the end of the day, the people are the most agile. They're the ones who are going to be the recipients of the services. So, and also it's a great thing to hear that a lot of the ministers and so forth have Twitter handles and have to be responsive to questions that are imposed upon them. So I think social media plays a huge role with greasing the wheels and creating that conduit that allows citizen-centric governments to come into fruition. Obviously, we've had some individuals who've spoken about regulation. You can tell there's concerns about deregulation, decentralized approaches. So there is going to be a necessary requirement of that within and a role of government to somehow play still an important role. You can't have a citizen government, I feel, even being part of a generation that you feel that it's power to the people. You still need that kind of coddling and helping across the goal line. But I think in the end of the day, the ability to touch government, the ability to see government, and the citizen-centric approach to that, working side by side and getting the input of the people, I think is going to be mission critical to be able to achieve such a goal and allow blockchain to flourish. Otherwise, just like that, government can put regulations, and as I think Alexia said, I mean, there's up to prison terms that can come with it. If they want to shut it down, they can in certain ways, in certain governments.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, thank you. Civic was just perfect example, and living in Switzerland, in one of the most democratized country, I would say, we have a lot of talks in that direction, and I see the projects going on in that area. People will always talk. People have always their opinions, and if we can have those opinions, I had the social media part, that's what we know today. But imagine a society which is incentivized, basically you pay for getting good ideas. And now in the parliament, we're looking at the ideas which the citizens of the country have brought and said, this is really a paining thing for me, or this is really our priority. Maybe even in areas in Uganda or the district where we don't usually hear their voices, it can help the government actually look into the specific areas. If you go on Twitter, some people do like this data analysis, etc. They usually measure, okay, how far did this go? We're using now here hashtag for the conference. And what it means is the data is gathered, and I can see how many are basically speaking about this one event and nothing else. Now imagine I could check how many people have currently this pain in Uganda through opening a communication channel. It doesn't have to be just social media. We have totally new tools today, and there is not to be a fear. We have different nations represented here, different experts sitting even here on the panel and even the audience. We have an opportunity to go now into a new dialogue and say, like, look, this is where we are, this is Uganda, this is how we do it, we love it, and it's good. But we want to move further. How can this technology allow us to do this and this and this? And I heard about the proof of concept, like the sandbox side, but also there's a proof of concept side where we try out It's not a must. It can be a trying out and see what is the Ugandan model.
Excellent.
And frame that.
Thank you. Thank you. Amy, your closing remarks?
Yeah. If we're to build a citizen-centric government, I think we need more sources of information. More sources of information coming from the citizens. Yes, we have social media. We have mobile phones, SMS, WhatsApp, and all. We need to be able to tap into the thinking behind all the services. We have to be able to tap into what our citizens are thinking. We need to be able to find more ways of getting that information, because it is the only way we're going to be able to move forward. But also we need to be cognizant of the things that we have done, all the efforts that are in progress. What are the things that are currently in progress? So that we only build onto what we already have.
That's correct.
So awareness, as much as we want to get information from the citizens, but also that information is to be fed back to the citizens. Awareness, so that citizens know what to demand. They need to be able to demand services that not already existing.
Thank you.
With improved awareness, I think we'll be able to move further, building just like the blockchain, block by block, and move forward into building a citizen-centric government.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen, and then Dorothy.
Yeah, Dorothy. Thank you, Dorothy. Let me say that we have passed the proof of concept stage. I think that is done. The business case has been made. But I think how we navigate going forward is very critical. My view is, in order to be able to realize full potential of blockchain, this must be supported by collaborative efforts between the private sector and the public sector in developing smart standards and regulations that are required, creating an enabling environment for blockchain startups through tax incentives. I think we were discussing that yesterday, grants and other mechanisms. And an example here would be that we all have to invest time and money. Government will have to invest resources, for example, in incubating new young developers, industry developers, to be able to support that side of things. Ourselves in the private sector, we need to invest time, resources to be able to put the message across. I think there's quite a bit of skepticism. There are a lot of doubting Thomases. We can sit here and talk, but you go in the corridor, somebody says, "No, is this going to work?" I think there's there's a lot of work that needs to be done, improve knowledge, put in time to put the message across. But, like they say, we are living in very interesting times.
Thank you very much. Stephen, and finally Dorothy.
Okay. Thank you. I think the exciting thing for me around blockchain, one is that we can move away from a shutdown or block approach to how we handle issues in the communication sector, speaking from that, because the blockchain brings about a trust ecosystem. That is really its basic tenant, and trust is equal to speed. That is what we picked from yesterday. So with relation to the citizen-centric government, therefore, that members have a voice, and their voice is valued, and they can share, let us say, just to the local level, to their districts, bring out issues, and these issues are forwarded to the appropriate authorities within the district, that the districts receive this feedback in good faith, they're not being hounded or anything, and that there's an expectation from the community that the district will actually respond to these issues, give feedback, even if it's just to say we are working on these things, so that we nurture that culture of sharing back and forth. I think this is a really great thing we need to move towards. And then on the third bit, and Stephen has actually touched on it, in terms of our developers to put these platforms and services together. Because it is true, everyone is getting into the blockchain space. And here, as Uganda, we are at par with the other places. Blockchain is a new technology, so blockchain developers, if I may use the word, they are new here just as they are new elsewhere. So we must have very deliberate programming to ensure that we have the people that can design the platforms and the services towards what is particular and fitting our needs and our particular infrastructure environment and communication sector, just as I would imagine for the rest of Africa would be similar on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, panelists. I think we are hearing a new phraseology in the way we do government, and the new word is trust. We have found a way of building better trust with the citizens. There is no way government can do business as usual. There has to be a concerted stakeholder engagement at all levels. And the other thing I'm hearing is the government, the politics, the politicians have to embrace the new movement. If the politicians don't embrace the new movement, this bus will go by Uganda, will go by Africa. We have a new opportunity. Once upon a time, we were colonized. Could this be the time that Uganda could, not Uganda, Africa could lead in this new revolution? Could this be an opportunity for us as a continent? I am also hearing an opportunity for innovation, especially in the way we harness mental capital, how our children learn, how they grow in their learning, and how they innovate. The creativity within Africa can be enhanced so that we don't just copy and paste curriculum, but children have an opportunity to learn. So I want to celebrate our panelists. Another big round of applause for them. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, and let's continue to network, and let's also celebrate the organizers of the Blockchain Conference. Another round of applause. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause. Thank you, Dorothy. Dorothy, amazing. Two Dorothys on the same panel. Gentlemen, ladies, you are free to leave the stage. Thank you very much. Thank you. You know, a week ago, I attended a very sad event. It was a funeral. And one of the children came up to the stage, and he was going to make a speech on behalf of the family and the siblings. And his opening remarks were, "I am sorry, I have a short speech." So I thought, a 6-year-old talking about a short speech. And it led me to how, whenever we stand here, we must make long speeches. Why do I say this? I'm trying to break tradition. In this room, there are so many distinguished ladies and gentlemen. If you notice, I have tried to stay away from calling people by names or titles. So please do not take an offense. I am trying to see how this works outside tradition. And if it lands me into trouble, I believe you will call me again to be a moderator or a panelist or an MC at another event. But like I said earlier on, we have 700 delegates from 23 countries represented. It's action-packed. There are so many things we're going to talk about in the breakout sessions. And before we break for lunch, I'm going to request the moderators of the breakout sessions to please stay behind for 5 minutes. We're trying to wrap up something so that when we come back after lunch, we have a smooth ride so that in the evening we do not leave here so late. So for now, allow me to ask you to break for lunch. We're going to have a 1-hour lunch break. Please be here by 2:30 so that we can start. I have my bell. Please don't allow me to use it. Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch. So moderators, for the afternoon session, please stay behind.